Welcome to Spatial Conversations. I'm Alex Bratton, the CEO and Chief Geek of Lextech, your host. And with me today, I have David Yin from PACCAR. Thanks for jumping in with us, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you've had a chance to work quite a bit in AR in your life so far. What are you seeing that has worked previously for augmented reality, and where do you see that going?
Well, definitely, there is this area where instructions meet hardware and software and electronics. Um, you can't quite see what's in front of you. And AR kind of gives you that ability to have like a MRI version of what a doctor uses. I don't know if you're familiar with X-rays and MRIs, but a doctor has all these tools.
I like that. So we're
Well,
giving everybody X-ray vision.
yeah.
That's
And
very cool.
and and why not? Why not enable our technicians to have better tools?
Now, you mentioned
Um,
technicians. Can you tell us a little bit about the world that you're in?
yeah, so we service automotive technicians or diesel technicians that work on heavy duty trucks, and oftentimes our trucks have gotten really complex. We want like power windows, and then the government tells us we have to control emissions, and yet we haven't really improved those tools, so to speak. So I think a schematic, right, was born back a long time ago, and that's really still the same tool that we use today. It needs to change. It really
Interesting.
does. Yeah.
Now, I know our teams have had a chance to work together on some augmented reality when it comes to the iPad, so
Yes.
Pre-Vision Pro.
Pre-Vision
Um,
Pro.
Anything you can share about that in terms of really from you'd mentioned the technicians, what was their reaction to it?
You
How did
know,
they appreciate that?
I've had so many people. I even had a person come to me when he learned that I was the one that kind of developed it and brought it to market. He just wanted to shake my hand,
Oh, that's cool.
and you know, I keep getting that over and over again. Um, they're
So you're
just
doing
like,
something
"Thank
right.
you."
You're doing
Yeah,
something right.
they just come to me and like very humble, and just saying thank you. We have such a hard time, um, especially new technicians who really have an aptitude to be able to take things apart, put things back together. But maybe, when things are hidden and electronic circuits are really hard to visualize, right? This technology gives them that edge of being able to visualize things. So,
Interesting.
what they tell us, the hardest things like, oh, there's a circuit that goes here and then it goes there and it goes throughout your truck and then it does this. And the poor technician just sitting there going, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. But then you show them all the visualizations, all the three-dimensional objects that we can provide, and suddenly they see the light bulb. They
Hmm.
understand,
Now
and
that's something we've heard from other folks quite a bit is just especially when it comes to technicians and folks in the field of we've got these great experienced folks in the field and many of them are retiring and moving on and we've got this younger crew coming in that doesn't have that experience yet and that gap is becoming a bigger and bigger hurdle.
it
Are,
is.
are you seeing that augmented reality and potentially things like the Vision Pro in the future are going to help with that?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I've heard the term, removing some of the roadblocks for our technicians, lowering down the standards so that they have less apprehension, less anxiety of getting into the field. They said, we're just having a hard time getting them in our front door. Can you
Mm.
give us something that helps? And we've thought about headsets from the very start. We always thought headsets that would be the way to go, right? Our technicians are always using their hands. They don't holding things. It's
So
just not
hands free is
conducive.
critical.
Hands free would really be great. Technicians love their job because they get a bay that's all to themselves, and no one's going to come into their little work area unless they invite them. And so it's great for people who want to be hands on, but maybe a little bit introvert.
So they want to be
So
self sufficient. They want
there you go,
everything
self
they need to get the
sufficient.
job done. Okay.
Um, so it's kind of hard to pull them out and go, here's a new tool. Let's talk about it. And so an iPad is a little bit more um, a baby step,
Hmm.
if you would,
Did that help for
um,
building trust of the technology? Or how
it
else did you build
definitely
that trust?
did.
Okay.
It the iPad. I mean, honestly, I still get the question, "Can I have a print button?" I still get that
Okay.
question.
Okay.
It's still there, but there's a lot of people that still no, no. I want my paper. I want my schematics. Um, so it's there. So you have to kind of understand your customer to understand to know what works,
And
right?
is that something you're seeing that is, I'm going to say maybe it's the younger folks who are coming into the field. Are they gravitating a little bit more to the technology solutions?
Oh, they definitely are. We'll go into a shop and we'll just put them on the table and just see what happens. And a lot of times, before I can finish my presentation, I got about a 15-minute presentation. I'll sit there and talk about the benefits. Um, but about 5 minutes in, I'll get this interruption. This young tech would say, "Oh my God,"
So he had
"Oh
a
my
wow
God, look at
moment. I love
this."
that.
Yeah. And then someone else would be like, "Hey, where were you yesterday? I needed to find this connector yesterday. I spent a whole day looking for this connector." Um, and then they'll teach the rest of the room because they're like, "Oh yeah, I did this and I did this and I did this." And the next thing I know, I'm just standing there going, "Well, okay, so do you like it?"
That's awesome. That's awesome.
They gravitate to it, right? I make the analogy of, my kid once wanted to do something and he needed my help, and I said, "Well, let me go get my laptop." And he goes, "No, Dad, I could do it all here on my phone." I'm like, oh, I felt really old.
Yeah, those aren't the greatest moments. I understand.
No, no.
Uh, so we talked a little bit about the kind of the augmented reality and the iPad application. Um, as we look a little bit more into kind of the Vision Pro and just some of the experimenting and thinking you guys have been doing with spatial computing or virtual reality, any uses that have been jumping out, whether it's if it's in the bay or elsewhere from a training or other perspective where it seems to maybe make sense for you?
Well, I think definitely there there's definitely a good use case for training. In training, you can really control the environment, right? You can
Mhm.
have a room with chairs and desks that you accidentally run into without a whole lot of liability. Um, Training, definitely. And the benefits are huge, right? Because those are the people that need that extra lift to help understand and ingest and get ramped up sooner.
Got it. And
That's the way I see it.
how are you capturing some of that knowledge from the experienced folks to help those new folks really roll into that? Do you have
Uh,
teams
you
kind of
know,
focused on that? What's that look like?
well, I mean, you have the training department, right? And
Hmm.
oftentimes, it's all still tribal knowledge.
Hmm.
We will, you know, we'll obtain the resources we need with all the right experience, who have been in the industry, so they can change the curriculum into something that's understandable. Um, so it's still very tribal knowledge. I wouldn't say there's been any leaps and bounds in technology there. Now,
Hmm.
what is nice, what we've been doing is using iPads to help be the visuals, and that's been really
Hmm.
nice. Take for example, there's a multimeter that you can Bluetooth to an iPad, and we
Hmm.
Bluetooth that and set it to the iPad. We then screen share up to an Apple TV, so the entire shop, all the students, can then see. Well, here are the readings.
Nice.
Instead of them all having to look at a small little multimeter. Okay, get over here. You see it? You know, they all can see it on a big screen. And when that number
Hmm.
changes about a little hair, everybody sees it. So the instructor can make their point.
Nice.
So
And
I
that
would I would
perfect
imagine
example
that
of
would be here.
enabling.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what you have here, your setup with the 6 screens, I'm like, yes, this is exactly. Now if I could
Training
just
room of
get
the
my
future. Here
truck
we
right
go.
there. I love it.
Hmm.
It's a great example of what needs to happen.
So truck right there. I heard that loud and clear.
Need
Coming
a truck
soon.
right here because then we would have all of our sources of information on
Hmm.
all the walls. And so when you touch something, I would want, instructions to show up. And kind of like what you're saying, in this space, it doesn't matter where you're sitting. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
how the room is organized. You're going to get to see the screen that you need to see.
Exactly. And maybe whether it's a truck, whether it's an engine, whether it's a wiring block I need to get to.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things that excites me so much about the spatial side of things is just
Right.
we can bring whatever resources we need to into our environment.
Yeah. And then if you think about the ideas of where they talk about the reverse classroom, right?
Yes.
Where you learn
Yes.
everything remotely, and then when you show up in class, you apply.
Hmm.
And if you can shorten that time span of what it takes to get a technician to start actually taking jobs by, say, half, I mean, it's huge. The investment value is huge.
Nice. So when it comes to looking at I'll say more of the industry as a whole, any
Hmm.
recommendations for, obviously you've lived this for a while, somebody who's new to whether it's augmented reality or starting to think about spatial computing, those kind of things, any recommendations of how they best get started with thinking about this?
That's a that's a very deep question. Yeah, because there's so many different aspects of this.
Hmm.
There's the source. Where are you going to get the source, right?
And I know
And
that's something you've had a lot of work that you guys have put
right,
into.
I mean, we have spent probably 75% of our budget goes towards source, making
Can
sure.
you share a little more about what source means to you?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we our my product ARTech produces harnesses and geometry that represents connectors and wires that would otherwise be hidden behind the truck, painted truck. Um, so in an idea, instead of having to rip apart a dashboard to take a look at all those harnesses, you would be able to see all those harnesses in real scale, but virtual, right? So obviously, you have to have somebody in charge of deriving all that content, whether you have to create it or you reuse it, but also making sure that that content is accurate. Most of, I would say that in anybody in the technician world, the data that you're presenting is more important than the feature.
And did you have challenges getting that from, if we rewind that to, I'll say, product engineers, manufacturing engineers, and then bringing it out to the point where it's usable by the technicians?
Yeah, we're still battling with that. We're still battling with that. We had several different pipelines, and we found the little niches and gotchas of each one, um, and which kind of leads me into my other area of that delivery mechanism. You have to have that experience. That's one of the things I've thought I could get away with not needing that, but now I recognize you have to have somebody who understands that what we call a sausage factory. How do you get it from point A to point B and not lose half of the goods in the process? So that's really important. Um, and then I think the other key area, which I think anybody would really agree with, is that your your product owner has to really be able to uh, translate requirements for the development team. Because many times, and especially nowadays, you're grabbing a dev team that's coming out of the gaming industry,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know what a car is. They don't. I'll tell you what. There's a young gentleman I met in Colorado Springs. He was a technician, and he said, "Oh, I love this," and he started asking me all these technical questions. And I looked at him. I thought, what? There's something I'm missing. And he goes, yeah, I'm studying computer science. I want to be a developer. And I thought, oh my God, can I give you my business card?
That's a
And
perfect translator between the two worlds. Nice.
yes, because that's the key is if I can find someone who can understand what it's like to be a technician and then be able to communicate that to a developer. That right
Mm-hmm.
there, because how many developers have dealt with an application that applies directly to the technician's world?
Or picked up a
It's
wrench and worked on an engine.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's
Or better
very
yet,
different.
I mean, you have a lot of developers that know backend systems, they know data,
Hmm.
but they don't necessarily know 3D. And you know a lot of 3D developers that know everything about 3D, know
Hmm.
everything about front end and UI, but maybe don't know anything about the data that's coming in, because most of those apps are kind of packaged, right? They're scene
Agreed.
based.
Agreed. And the
Um,
new area now of when we talk about spatial, where if it isn't virtual reality and we're bringing things into a real environment, that's a new kind of design nobody's done before.
right,
And
right,
what does that look like if I'm hands-on working on something and I've got a reference manual here and a video here and I'm talking to somebody up here?
right.
That's just such a different world.
It
Um,
is.
so looking at some of those types of problems where you've really looked at, I'll say, call it the business value of where you've tried to help
Right.
the technician so far. Um, any, I guess, great examples that have jumped out of the types of things you've either enabled people to do, the time that you've saved them, in terms of business value of what that's come out as?
The biggest business value is just enabling more people to understand our trucks so they can keep them on the road longer. That's the biggest value. And then to all of the users that hear what we're doing, they just get charged up in knowing
Mm,
that somebody is there trying to make their life a little bit easier.
that's awesome. It
Um,
sounds like you've got a group of champions that's already in process, and that's something we've seen is so critical with new
yeah,
tech is if folks don't realize and don't really wrap their arms around it of I want this, this is for us, this is helping us, then that resistance kicks in.
right, right. We've been asked, hey, would you be willing to license your technology to another OEM, because this is an
Mm,
incredible platform, and it's doing so much. I just need it for my truck now, not just your truck. So, um, it's been enlightening. I've been
interesting.
getting I save up all those emails when people are just like, oh my god, your presence there was just so uplifting. We hear about parts and how to sell more parts, and now we actually have something interesting in the service side, and so that's encouraging that we're making a difference.
That's awesome. Well, so last question for you: if we sit back and we look a little bit to the future,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at again whether it's augmented reality, spatial computing, the Vision Pro, or maybe even dabbling a little bit with AI, where do you see technology creeping in over the next 5 to 10 years as far as the technician experience, and what do you think it's going to let people do?
I think, AI is great in being able to do more with what seems like less. What I would personally love to have is something that could take data and visualize it the way it needs to be visualized without requiring so much labor to create it, because right now we're handcrafting all that.
Mhm.
Um, because what I would imagine, which I'm sure the metaverse has figured out already, is you have all these devices and all these users, but you don't have enough scenes.
It's about the
And
worthwhile content. I get it.
yeah, I think that's going to happen. But I think AI is going to show up in those areas. I saw the keynote speech from um, the NVIDIA. Um, was it last CES show? His keynote speech was incredible. And just seeing what they can do with smaller amounts of pixels or smaller data sets, with less energy is it's just promising on what's the future. So, how can we accelerate generating the content that people want to see, both in metaverse, but also in manufacturing and enterprise, because
Hmm.
it takes a long time to craft up one scene. So we got to be able to figure out how to do that differently. So
Awesome.
that's how I see it. Yeah,
Okay.
and then of course, I would imagine that over time, just like everything else, these headsets are going to get more affordable, and we're going to be able to make a business case for a customer to say, here's just invest this much money, you're going to be able to do it. We've already got the application, just throw it on there, and you're up and running. The whole
With real business value. Yeah.
right with things that technicians will want to wear into it.
David, thank you for jumping in. This has been
Yeah,
awesome. I have to ask you for, of course, we got to do the fist bump.
got to do the fist
Nice.
bump.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it. And Thank you all for watching another Spatial Conversation.